crazy hair, don't care. Hey, I'm Josephine. This is my channel, The Versatile Housewife, and if you clicked on this video, you are probably wanting to sew some aprons, and this pattern might be a little bit confusing for you. The Simplicity 8857 apron pattern, this video is going to be just kind of cutting the pieces, doing those first steps for those C and B aprons. They're pretty similar, so let's get into it. If you are watching this and just kind of following along with the steps, then you have your pieces traced or pinned. We're going to go ahead and we're going to get them cut. Even if you're not quite following along here and you already have your pieces cut, I have in the chapters the next step, which is ironing. I guess you don't really have to go forward to do that part. And then those first few stitches, we're going to try and sew at least a couple things in this video. This series will be in a playlist format and not just one long form video. So go ahead and check out the playlist related to the Simplicity aprons, and anytime I add a new video to it, you will be able to see whether it's for the A style apron or the B and C style apron. One of the biggest differences between B and C is if you're going to add any kind of like underskirt frills, and then of course the length of the straps. One is tie in the back, the other is tie around to the front. So that's just going to matter in how much yardage you're going to need and any other materials if you are going to decorate it. But a lot of times with patterns for things like that, you know, we have our own creative liberties. And that's what I do with the pockets. That's why the one that I made has heart-shaped pockets. Here's the fabric that I'm going to use for this. This might seem like risky business, but I'm going to go ahead and cut it on this bed. Hopefully I don't cut my comforter.
Something to note when I do this is that this is going to be the bodice and the straps that I use this fabric for. The skirt, I will be using some red fabric that I have, and I will also be lining it with the contrast fabric that I'm using. And for the bodice, I'm lining it with contrast fabric. You can use the same fabric for the lining if you would like. It's just keeping an eye on the yardages. And another thing is I do end up making a mistake later in this video. So sometimes it's good to have a little bit extra fabric. That way, you know, if you mess something up, you're good to go. But one thing that I love about using these bright colored fabrics for any portion of this apron style is that you can really match it and make some fun combinations. So I do think that this is going to come out just fine. Also, something I do when I work on these, I note where the notches are and I just use pen and write them down right onto the fabric. I find that that makes it really easy when I'm stitching the pieces together to line them up without, you know, the way my grandmother taught me was to do little jut outs. The way some people do is they will cut into the fabric using notches, which if you are scarce on fabric and you're trying to take in the size a little bit where the seam allowance is and save yourself some space there, obviously notching it is not as useful.
I will take what's here and save it in case I want to do some fun pockets with this fabric against the skirt color, which I'm going to use red. I do not have enough of this to do the size skirt that I would like to do. And let's cut out the contrast for the bodice. Also, I saved my scraps for my postage stamp quilt. The fabric that I'm using for the contrast has little stars on it. Now, if you went ahead and you traced out the contrast in the last video, that is awesome. I like to cheat. I didn't actually trace out the contrast in the last video, so I'm going to go ahead, lay these over it, and use these as my guides. And I really like to do that. I think it has a really good fit because it's perfectly synced to it. Although I guess you could take issue thinking, oh, well, it's going to be mirrored, but it's just a matter of how you lay it down, and then it will be mirrored perfectly. Also, just FYI, to trace, you're going to want to iron again, which is great. Iron, cut, do some stitches. So I'm whipping out my ironing board, my iron, and going ahead and ironing the fabric that I'm going to be using for the backside of this apron. And not only will I end up doing this for the bodice, but I'm going to do this for the skirt as well. You do not have to double layer the skirt if you would like to stick to what the pattern is saying. Did I already say it in this video yet? I am doing that because I'm going to make sure that the skirt is thicker
So if I am working with things like liquids, oils, it's just a little bit more protective because I'm using quilting cotton. Now I have part of the bodice here and you see I'm laying it on flat. The nice thing about this method is it kind of clings to it. So I enjoy doing this. It's easy for me. It's convenient. It doesn't have needles. And if my kids wake up, get up, come to me, depending on if this is in the night or in the morning, it's a lot easier to stop and just put my scissors away and put that iron up high versus if I have lots of needles. They've gotten into my needles before. It's always a nightmare when that happens. So for this, I'm just being mindful about which side I am placing these on. So they are wrong sides to wrong. You could also do right sides to right, but it's just, I don't know. I enjoy looking at the pattern. It's not really a big deal. And then for this piece, it has a little jut out here where I didn't cut it quite right. So I'm just kind of keeping that in mind, and I'm going to at least make the lining actually fit it. So with this pattern, it's a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So plenty of room when I am following the markers to be able to sew it just fine. And then this piece right here, I left this in. I did it backwards and I didn't realize it until I fully cut it out. And then I was thinking, because I still want it to look nice, even from the back. If you don't really care or you're using just straight up white, it's probably not a big deal, but I just want it to be cohesive. When you end up cutting this out, this is the grain line. This is where the threads are intersecting 90-degree angles. It needs to be lined up like this. So with the other pieces, we had them going straight up and down. This is going to be here. And the reason that we're doing this, and it calls for this, is watch the stretch from the fabric. When you pull this way, mildly stretchy. You pull this way, not stretchy at all. You pull this way, very stretchy. And see how it is curved? You want it to be able to stretch. That way it's easy to manipulate and happier to lay flat, although I do need to iron this. Now I'm going ahead and ironing more of the fabric because I didn't fully iron it. So what I do, especially because I don't trace my pieces onto wax paper to preserve them longer, it's kind of wrinkly, I try to lay it out flat with my hand best as I can. And then I like to take a pen or a pencil and outline it. Since I will be sewing, not right on the very edge, I'm never going to see this ink in my outfit. Now, I would imagine if you are doing something like a nightgown, or not a nightgown, like a wedding dress or anything very formal, or evening gown, something like that, maybe you might not want to use this, but there's other tools. I believe it's called tailor's chalk. And again, I've mentioned I've got kids, and whenever I get interrupted, this just helps me so much to not worry about placing pins. I don't have one of those overhead projectors. I also don't have a cutting mat. So when I'm using my pins, a lot of times I'll be poking whatever fabric is underneath. And I have just found that this works really well for me. And if I must stop, I can fold the fabric back up and all the lines are there. And at that rate, oftentimes I don't even worry about ironing again. I can just go ahead and cut it even with new fold lines in it. So going ahead, cutting these two front pieces off, out, whatever. I don't know how to speak today. I have been very busy. Now going ahead, getting the skirt fitted onto the red fabric that I'm going to be using for it. And once I cut this out, I'm also going to do another side for the white. And that'll be how it is lined. I'm very excited to show you how it will look. And I will show you a comparison between my red apron with the pink hearts for pockets and this one. So laying it out, my pattern piece is really bad. What I was talking about before is there are people, I had a friend teach me this and I hadn't done it and I should, especially if you have adjustable sizes and you really know what your size is. You can take wax paper, put it underneath, put your pattern paper on top of it and you can trace it. And then when you are working on your unique size, you can make the adjustments you need. And then your pattern paper is completely safe. Well, I say completely safe. You know, it's the little use that you did, and then you can just use the wax paper over and over and over again and kind of preserve your pattern paper for working with. And I cannot explain why I haven't done that yet with this. I really need to. I think it's just when I'm finally done, I'm done. It's just an extra step where I don't feel like working on it when I have to deal with the kids. So here I'm going ahead and folding it over. There is a crease that I'm being mindful of so that I know I can keep it even. If you would like, you could always iron it and really make a sturdy crease, but I just made sure to fold it in half. And as I cut this out, I'm going to be mindful of where I needed to put some notches. And I think I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But yep, there, the notches. Here we go. So for these notches, I put a couple pins where I knew that they were, got my pin, and then I just did a little marking, and I did it on both sides so that I can keep my eye out for it when I work with it. Now, I kind of mess up later in that I sew it before fully knowing where the notches are. I can, when I hold it up to light, see the little dark spots, because even though the white fabric does have a little shiny star pattern to it, it's not really that aggressive. So I can see where they are, and I will make them brighter again before I start working on the next phase when I eventually go to attach the skirt to the bodice. So once I get this all cut out, I'm going to go ahead and just work on the skirt steps. When you are looking at your pattern, you're going to be jumping ahead to step 10, and it's asking you to do a stay stitch and also to trim away some of the edges. Now, what I don't understand is why this pattern has you already cutting out those extra pieces, but I'm going ahead and pinning the skirt. I'm actually going to go ahead and pin the entire skirt because I am going to do a stitch around the entire skirt so that it stays together when I go to do my bias tape and things like that. But I'm trimming the edges. You saw me trim the first one at the beginning, and now I'm doing the stay stitch. So the stay stitch is a stitch held that's holding the hip area where it's going to attach to the bodice. So when eventually you do go to sew the skirt to the bodice, it keeps its form. It's a lot easier to work with. It helps it to stay in place. It's not quite the same as basting. I did the stitch length at 3 as opposed to doing it at 2 or 4 because 4 is basting. I did it to 3, and then I also just, when I get to the end, I do a locking stitch, and by the end, I mean the end of the stay stitch. I do a locking stitch, and I adjusted my needle to be on the right side, and I went ahead and I just sewed the 2 layers together. But I'm going to just let the audio play at some point in here. You can see me fiddling around. It's because I'm constantly fighting with this thread, you know, the like Walmart brand thread. It keeps getting caught, and then it gives me tension issues because the thread is caught and the machine can't pull any thread through it. So you'll see that, you'll see me talk about it, but I'm kind of done narrating for now. There's really not a whole lot to explain. It's a lot of stitching. Watch here, this is where the tension starts to really become noticeable because the thread did end up kind of locking out. It broke. And now I also have like an eyelash in my eye.
Well, I didn't expect the only pieces to be sewing would be just the back to the skirt and the front of the skirt, which is an addition I am making because I'm using quilting cotton, as I have a ton of quilting cotton that I was gifted by my grandmother. It is not as thick as the type of cotton that you're recommended to use for this pattern, and considering I would like to have something that is good for cooking, where if I get any hot oil or there's liquids, because there's extra material, it's going to be just a little bit more protective. So that is all that I'm going to have for today, but I am on a roll. However, the amount of time that I have to work on this is limited to late at night and first thing in the morning. And if you didn't notice the camera shaking near the end of that, I have a little one who came into my room and started waving a bowl at me because they want oatmeal. So I need to go get breakfast taken care of. And yeah, I will see you for the next video, but everything's laid out and hopefully it'll be pretty soon that we can start doing the bodice. That's the part we're going to work on, getting that bodice taken care of. But to have all these pieces cut out means it'll be pretty easy going. And I do think that A and B, with the main variation just being the fact that one uses longer straps and another one uses shorter ones, it's gonna be pretty easy going. The A pattern, which I will do a different video on probably when I'm finished with this. The skirt is the same thing. The top is more confusing, but we'll take care of this one, hopefully before the end of the month. But honestly, dealing with a lot of needles on a large scale, the skirt, just because it's such a large piece of fabric, and the fact that I did two linings, I did two layers. Yeah, it took a little bit more time. So I will see you in the next video. Just keep an eye on the titles, and then you will know which pattern it applies to, whether it's going to be A or B and C. Thank you for watching this far. Bye.